Well, good morning and welcome to the inaugural Sustainability and Community Resilience meeting. Oh, John Morrissey is here. We don't need an apology for lateness for John. I would like to open the meeting with the karakia, and I've asked Martin Rodley to do it for us. Please stand. Thank you.
May clarity be yours, the respect and understanding be yours, the virtue of kindness is one through perfection. May we be filled with well-being through personal endeavour.
Yeah. Thank you, Martin. Do we have any apologies this morning? We don't have Delhi online yet. Okay, can we mark Delhi down as a lateness apology? Thank you. Fantastic. And I would also just like to acknowledge the presence of Councillor Peter Revell and Deputy Mayor Terry Walker at this inaugural meeting. Thank you for coming. Do appreciate your presence here as a support for the committee. Much appreciated. Moving on to item 1.3, we've got 3 speakers in public forum, and I would like Dennis Teague to come forward as our first speaker in public forum. Thank you, Dennis. Dennis, I'll give you a ding at a minute because I just, when you've got a minute left, because I really enjoyed dinging the button.
Right.
Is that all right?
Yeah, sure.
You'll hear the sound.
Right. I just can't quite hear you.
You'll hear the sound when you've got a minute left.
Right. Okay. Well, I do have some introductory remarks, so I'll start the timer after that, if you don't mind. So I think what we should start with by just marking what an auspicious occasion this is. Now, this is the first meeting of this committee, and I've been looking forward to its formation for some years. I'd like to commend you on the paper and the agenda relating to EV transition of your fleet to EVs, and also the decision you recently made relating to Maori wards. Just a wee bit for those who don't know about me, my CV, if you like. I'm the chair of Hauraki Coromandel Climate Action. For 3 years, I was the deputy chair of the Waikato Regional Council's Climate Action Committee. And in a personal sense, I've done a lot of the things that I'm urging you to do in terms of solar panels, driving an EV, growing my own food, having water tanks, etc. So we'll get this underway. Next slide, thanks. So this is the topic of my presentation today. Next slide, thanks. So my first point is the council has a mandate for ambitious action, and that's because I won't go into too much detail, but Hauraki Coromandel Action took a court case. As a result of that court case, the council was obliged to go out and consult with the public, and this is the result of that the council's own public engagement. 94% of those who responded said the council should sign the declaration. Next slide, thanks. As part of that, Hauraki Coromandel Action did their own public survey for the submission on the long-term plan in 2021, and 81% of those who responded, there were 300 respondents, actually agreed with what my submission is today, is that the council should have an emission reduction plan. And then, of course, we all remember that 300 people marched to these offices in 2019. Next slide, thanks. In addition, council has itself already committed to strong action, and that's the resolution that was passed in these chambers in 2021. And the first relates to the declaration. We don't need to go back over that. The one I want to emphasise is the second part of that resolution, and that is where specifically at the assistance of the chair, these words here, continue developing an ambitious climate change and emission reduction work, was added to that resolution. So the point I want to make, and I won't dwell on it, but maybe the staff should go back and read the court decision. I believe those two resolutions create a legitimate expectation of taking ambitious action. Next slide, thanks. So it's also the law that emission reductions now be considered in the RMA, and that's to ensure that it lines up with national strategies. And there's a guidance note on that from the government. Next slide, thanks. And in that guidance note, the council may consider in resource consents the effect of emission reductions. And the point I'd make that is around that is if the council is going to require emission reductions and applicants for resource consents, maybe it just has to have its own house in order as well before it asks others to do that. And the second part is the most important, I think, is the government recommends that emission reductions be incorporated into funding and financing and strategies. So like your LTP, and that's the main thrust of my submission, is that's the direction you need to go with this. Next slide, thanks. So just re-emphasising that, that's the whole point around the submission. This is your ideal opportunity as you formulate your LTP for next year, that you have the funding and financing in place to make those reductions. Next one. So these are suggested next steps. There's nothing too unusual about this. Kapiti did this in 2012. They started this exact process. So the first step is to measure your emissions. There's guidance available for that. You then put up or make up an inventory, and there are companies there that will provide that certification for you. So all these facilities are available to the council. Next slide, thanks. And then the main point is to actually set a science-based target. It's no good having a target that is out to 2050. That doesn't mean much. So you need one for 2030, and based around the science of what we need to do to keep warming below 2 degrees and preferably 1.5. Next slide, thanks. And then to support that target, you need what's called a CERC, a Council Corporate Emission Reduction Plan. And that would be planning up to 2030. This is an example of one. I can send it to you all. It's just one example of many of how you would go about it. Next slide, thanks. And then the next step was reinforcing that point again, that you need to identify specific projects. You have one with your EV transition, but there are many others, and John will enlarge on that in his submission, and ensuring that funding is provided. So the point I'd make is that if you don't have a target, you don't have a plan, and you don't have specific projects, you're not achieving ambitious action. Okay, next one, thanks. And then obviously just the sort of tailing off of that, you need to monitor what you're doing and report back to the public. Next slide. This is an example of the emission reduction. So sort of an odd graph. This is the down screen over here, 23, and that's the percentage reduction that's been achieved by Waikato Regional Council. Right. So the point I'd make that is they've reduced their emissions by 41% since 2017, and they've held their rate increases to inflation. So that doesn't necessarily mean huge cost increases or rate increases. These things in many cases will actually save you funds. Next. So that's a summary. I won't go over that. You can read it at your leisure. And I'll just finish with a couple of quotes. Why it's important. We can't adapt our way out of this problem. We can't adapt our way out of the issues we're facing all around our coast. Unless we reduce emissions, that's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And the third quote is one that you hear, the second quote, sorry, next one, thanks. We hear a lot, oh, we're too small, we can't do anything. What can TCDC do? Well, we never said that when we sent troops overseas in a world war. And arguably, as this quote suggests, the climate crisis is many times worse than the threat of World War II. So I'll leave you with those thoughts. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dennis. Does anybody have questions? Martin?
So often we say, well, let's put something in place and then review it every 5 or however many years. But you seem to be suggesting that it's reviewed way more frequently, and that it's much more of a fluid, adaptable.
That's right. If you set the target as one thing, but if you're not achieving it, then how you need to review that every year, I think, and that Waikato regional plan is actually published every year. So they measure their progress and see where they're going, and they're actually not doing too bad. They're probably ahead of their target. But if you're falling behind, then you'd have to think about how you would up the ante on it. So yeah, definitely annual reviews, and then also 3 yearly reviews when you're reviewing your long-term plan, so that you're making sure you've got the funding in place to achieve if you need to alter it all. Yeah.
I just had a follow-up question about that. Last week or week before last, when I was at the Future for Local Government LGN did discussion, there was quite a lot of discussion about having plans that exceeded the 10-year lifespan of the LTP. So would you be advocating and supporting us to have a climate action plan that was longer than that time frame of the LTP?
Sure. It's great to have a longer term plan, but I think in terms of trying to set a target, having a shorter one is the ideal, because those those science-based targets mean we have to reduce our emissions by about 50% by 2030. So the action is all now. It's what we do in the next 3 or 4 years that's going to count.
Thank you.
So I think you need both, frankly.
And just as a follow-up, would you please make those slides available for the members of the committee?
Sure, I'll email a PDF.
Oh, you've got Donna will email them to us. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can make that a PDF or yeah.
Before I call on the next speaker, I would just like to confirm that we have advertised for a climate change advisor role and have filled that position with council. So
Excellent.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Dennis. John, please come up and do your presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, would you mind? Yeah. Right, so just following on from Dennis, before I start, my name's John Leenman. I've been an EV advocate in the area for some years. I'm a member of HCCA, Hauraki Coromandel Climate Action, Transition Town Thames, and I've got to remember this one, HRCT, the Hauraki Resilient Communities Trust. And that trust operates the shared EV, which is available in Thames. Okay, so here are just some thoughts. Oh, okay. The first and foremost, the most important thing, if we can do in any way possible, avoid new emissions. That's a key thing. Everything else is subservient to that, avoiding new emissions. Secondly, reduce emissions where possible and improve energy efficiency, which I think you're already looking at. Replace existing sources of emissions with lower emission options, and increase carbon sequestration. And I'll talk about that later. Offsetting emissions is very much a last resort and one to be avoided if possible, but it's an option. Thank you. Probably the key thing in my talk is about council decision making. I would suggest that all council decisions need to be filtered through a lens of emission reductions. Everything. If that's done, everything else will fall into place and we can all go home happy. And key council decisions include business cases, project plans, procurement processes, and council reports, procurement processes. I would suggest looking at the rubbish and recycling collection vehicles, which are ideally suited for EVs, but I don't see any on the road because they're stop-start habit. They're perfect for that role. And they are being built in New Zealand. Okay, around energy, install solar panels or arrays where it's suitable on your buildings and land. Other councils are doing this, and it's certainly a way to reduce your carbon footprint. Reduce energy usage from infrastructure construction. Infrastructure construction does use a lot of energy and it's possibly not being audited. Conduct night audits of lighting and heating systems so that council buildings don't look like Christmas trees as we drive past at night time. Audit all buildings for energy efficiency and retrofit as appropriate. Regarding transport, I just want to say I'm very heartened by the plans that I hear coming through TCDC now around transitioning fleets to EV. So I just add, optimize the fleet use and vehicle numbers and minimize unnecessary trips. That's also about auditing use of the vehicles. Defer purchase of high emitting vehicles. I think you may already have this, but EV 4x4s will be available very shortly. They're just not here yet. We've only got 2-wheel drives and hybrids. And consider electrification of off-road machinery, such as the ride-on mowers. They're also available as EVs in New Zealand, in fact, built here, but I don't see them in use in our area. A key thing, if you're in the transition, and you're probably on this already, a key thing is to make sure your staff are fully trained around the use of EVs. They are a little different from petrol and vehicles, and if people don't feel confident in EVs, they won't use them. Obvious, but still, I'll say it, reduce air travel wherever possible. Air travel is a very high emitting source of travel. Promote staff and new staff buy-in to emissions reductions in any plans. And this could be aided by encouraging a climate ambassador within staff. Waste, once again, I hear good things about what's happening with waste with the council. I would add, reduce and recycle in-house waste going to landfill where possible. Explore options for capturing methane from the closed landfills, which I think is probably an issue. Okay. Right, under operations, review emissions reductions in all asset activity management plans in the long-term plan. Make low carbon a higher priority for procurement and contracts. Once again, that refers to the council contracts with the waste and recycling companies that you employ. Implement in-house water conservation measures. Okay. Reduce energy waste, energy use at wastewater plants. This is being done in Otaki, in the Kapiti Coast. There was a collaboration between the local council and a not-for-profit, and they installed a 100 kilowatt array right next to the wastewater processing plant. That's been operating successfully for a couple of years now, and that generates income for that local not-for-profit to put back into the community in charitable ways. Very useful collaboration. And finally, sequester carbon through planting trees. This has been done at the Omaha Cemetery, and Transition Town 10's provided 500 trees a few years ago to be planted there. And I see a large block of land underneath the monument, which is wasteland now, but was perhaps intended to be planted at some time. That could be worked on, and no doubt there are other areas that could be planted up. Thank you. And that's really me. Thank you very much for your time, and good luck with your deliberations.
Thank you, John. Anybody have a question for John? Councillor Rodley.
Of course.
So the Otaki scheme.
Yeah.
So is that, I mean, without you, I'm sure you could probably spend an hour explaining it, but is that, so it's council owned land, but the Otaki Trust owns, the Energy Trust owns the panels?
Yeah, correct.
And then they distribute the, sorry, I'm asking you a question and answering it at the same time. Could you tell us briefly about the Otaki energy scheme?
Yeah, it's council land. They lease it to Energize Otaki, that's just the not-for-profit, for $1 a year. And thank you. And the funds generated from the sale of the power at almost the same price to the council then goes into community initiatives. social initiatives, addressing poverty and similar things. It's a very useful collaboration between council and a not-for-profit. And I would love to do the same here.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. And I assume that the presentation has also been sent to Donna, and you'd be happy for the committee to have a copy. Thank you. Thank you both for the presentations. Next in public forum, we have Greg Hampton. Please come to the front, Greg. I'll give you a bell in a minute. Would you be able to turn your microphone on, please? Push the button on the right.
So, good morning, Chair, elected members and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm wanting to speak to the item of District Information Centres year-end reporting. Firstly, can I congratulate you on the formation of this committee, and also want to acknowledge that this group of people over here are doing the most crucial work in the community. So this is nowhere near that important, but it is still important because we still need to have a buoyant and sustainable economy. So information centres play a part in that. I think, so Greg Hampton from Carson's Bookshop in Thames. I'm also a steering group member of the Thames Branding and Promotion Project, which is being run by the Thames Community Board, and I'm a past staff member of council. So a little bit of history on information centres in Thames quickly. Pre-2015-16, the information centre was situated by Gull Service Station down the southern end of Thames and operated by an incorporated society made up of business and community interest groups. In 2015-16, at that point in time, I was the Thames area manager, and along with the community board, the Thames Community Board invested over $250,000 into relocating the Thames Information Centre to the Thames Civic Centre. The buses at the same time, so there were roading alterations and new offices built into the Thames Civic Centre to house the information centre. The business case around that was that we wanted visitors to be landing in the centre of town. The operation of the information centre was contracted to Destination Hauraki Coromandel. The business case was founded not only on that, but the fact that the Thames Civic Centre is a Thames ratepayer asset and 100% funded by the Thames ratepayer. Donna will correct me if I'm wrong on that. And so part of their business case was that we created 2 new offices that were a revenue stream into an asset that was very underutilised. And so it was seen as an important part of the business case that both the information centre and Destination Coromandel offices were located there and were both paying a rental into that local funded facility. Sometime 2021, Destination Coromandel didn't want to operate the visitor centre anymore, so that prompted staff to have to move quickly, I guess, and look at options. So I want to acknowledge Lorna and Kirsten that they didn't have much time to find a solution for the Thames Information Centre at that time. So what occurred was that a 3-year contract was entered into with Goldfields, and that contract comes to a conclusion next year. So really, I think the point of my submission to you today is that I don't think that solution has worked well. It's an unmanned visitor information centre. We get inquiries into our bookshop every day of the week where people saying, where can I get some information? We provide them what we can and so forth. But basically, we probably went from paying Destination Coromandel something between $80,000+ a year to paying $53,000 in round figures to Goldfields for 25 square metres, which equates to about $2,111 per square metre per year. And I really don't think, so basically I went down there this morning and there are 7 brochures for that are Thames specific. So I am talking from a Thames perspective here. I don't think that current information centre serves well. The kiosk, which I believe council purchased in lieu of the first year rent, that's not working this morning. I'm not sure what the issue is, but basically I think we've gone backwards from a position where we had a manned central operating visitor centre to one that is unmanned, is not well utilised. I think John's report alludes to that as well. And I think the important thing now is that as part of the development of the 10-year plan, there needs to be a full range of options developed for where to next, because the contract is ending in October. I'd be very happy to help out in any way I can. I think there's a whole range of options. I think there's some operating models that can be looked into with the Thames Business Association. So I'd be very happy to help that with that research in preparation for the 10-year plan. I just want to finish on 2 things. And the first is that I feel that Thames doesn't get a lot of love in relation to its importance to the peninsula. Commercially, there's no doubt that Thames is the commercial capital of the sub-region, not just this district. And I think it should be a key strategy in your sustainability and resilience project. It has significance commercially, but it also has large significance geographically. As we know, the bridge will be up and running by the end of December, which is fantastic news, but we've had a very, very tough couple of years. But that's only as good as until the next storm. So we know that we will continue to have road issues. The significance of Thames geographically is that 99% of the time we are still accessible. We are the largest commercial base on the peninsula. It is our biggest economic community on the peninsula, I'm sure. And we are still accessible when roads go down elsewhere, when the Thames coast goes down and so forth. So I believe that we need to develop more visitor product in this area. And of course, we have the gems of the Coorong Valley and the Dock Estate. And I think we need to leverage that more, the Hauraki Rail Trail. So that's one point I'd like to make, is I think Thames needs to be highlighted for its significance in the resilience strategy. And my last point is one around local procurement policy. To my knowledge, this council does not have a local procurement policy. Economically, our towns are under huge risk at the moment economically. We have Thames, which is losing tenancies in the main street regularly. And if it continues, it won't be much of an offer for visitors to come in and visit. This council spends a huge amount of money outside of the region, a lot of it necessarily, but I wonder when those procurement decisions are made, whether there is enough focus on what we could spend within our own economy so that we re-spend that money within our own communities. So I really recommend that a local procurement policy is developed as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions? Oh, Councillor Rodley again.
Sorry to be monopolising the questions here. So you talked earlier, Greg, about the business case for when the information centre was down by the Gulf and then moved. But I mean, and obviously the model for information centres has changed considerably with
Yeah.
online booking and things. So do you think it's time for like actually a complete rethink about how that how information centres are worked, given that there's potentially not the revenue that there used to be?
Yeah, I think working in with an existing organisation, non-for-profit organisation, is probably the best option. What I would like to say is that the feedback that we get every week of the year is that people value human communication. And I think human communication is much more effective. Like people will turn up and say, I'm here for 1 day. What can I do? I'm here for 2 days. What can I do? They're not going to get good advice from an app. I don't, you know. And just on a point, that branding project has a new website, which will be a big improvement. But I think nothing beats a human interface for being able to have a conversation, really understand what someone's looking for, and the local knowledge. You can't get all of that on an app and device. So I think that's always, you know, the preference is to have a manned information centre. And I think we've got enough people in our community that would contribute and volunteer and so forth.
Thank you.
And there's examples of that around the community already.
Thank you, Greg. Just before we officially, just before we officially ask for a mover and a seconder on this, I'd just like to acknowledge the arrival of Delly Connell at the beginning of the presentation by Greg. So welcome, Delly. Lovely to have you here. So can I get a mover and a seconder to receive the presentations in public forum? Yep, Rick.
Thank you.
John. All those in favour? Aye. Carried. Thank you. 1.4, any items not on the agenda? No, none. Great. What about any conflicts of interest? Anybody have a conflict of interest about anything on the agenda today? Perfect. In that case, we'll move on to 2.1, Information Centre Annual Report. And we have Kirsten. Kirsten Scarrett, please come to the front. Welcome. Thank you for your time. You can take the report as read, but I would just like to invite you to add any extra information and tell us anything else that we need to know. Thank you.
Okay, so I take it that you've also read the attachments, the KPIs for the information centres, and the separate report from John Freer from Goldfields. And I take on the feedback just received by Greg Hampton in the public gallery. There is a review on the information centres coming up, so that will be in front of council this month, and it will give us an opportunity to explore options for Thames and the rest of the information centres around our district. Yeah, so this report really is just to update you on the KPIs and to show you where they're all currently sitting. Everybody is meeting their KPIs. The KPIs are quite, you know, they've been the same for years. They're, I think there's room for those to be improved if we are to keep the same format for the information centres.
Is that right? Both the lights went on.
I believe we can hear you now.
Sorry, technology is not my friend. Thank you. I just have one question. Can you just remind me, just looking at your, I think it's Appendix A, Attachment A, the funding, is that a district funded or are these all locally funded?
District funded.
They're all district funded.
Yes, currently.
All right, thank you.
So I just wanted to actually some clarification from what Greg had said. So he said that he thought the kiosk at Goldfields Mall was purchased by council?
No, council provided funding to the Ganson Group Limited, who own the Goldfields Mall.
Yep.
And they have utilised that funding to purchase and maintain the kiosks.
Okay. And follow-up question. he also said there was a 3-year contract. Now, I've looked back through the resolutions from 2021 and several other resolutions for information centres on the peninsula did mention a 3-year contract. The one for Thames said that the council approved Goldfields Mall having a kiosk as the Thames Information Centre, and there was no particular date put on that. And at the time, and I'm sure previous community board members would back me up, we were told that it's just for 2 years, we'll get to review it in 2 years. So have you any comment on that? Because the 2 years is now up.
I think the information centre, the kiosk was installed in, it is in the report, in December 21.
Yep.
And they had the contract expired when all of the rest of the information centres expire, which is the 30th of June next year. So there's a report coming to council to look at a review for the information centres and for Thames. And that you'll have, that will be that's this month. So we are looking to review the operating of the Thames.
Yeah. I mean, if we just through the chair, we do seem to have some potential, disagreement about how long it was for, but I'll move on to one more question. So the KPIs in that attachment A has got funding, door numbers and wages. Was there not previously, as part of the KPIs, like that number of hours that they were open?
That is part of their KPIs, yes.
Right. So is there a reason that we've only got funding, door numbers, wages?
They all did meet their KPIs for the door numbers. I can send you these reports separately. We just did a high level snapshot. Some of them have 20 KPIs, some of them have 10 KPIs. They're not consistent across the board. So we just picked the high level ones to do this infographic.
Yeah.
But the information is can be available to you.
Could
The
we,
whole report.
sorry, one more follow-up. Could we request that, as long as it's not going to be dozens of hours of work for staff, could we request some information on those KPIs? Does anyone else want it, or is it just me?
Each of the reports that they do have like a table. So it would be quite an easy process. They list their KPIs and they just have a little box to the right about how they've met them. So I can provide that quite easy.
Just let Lorna have a comment
I
on
was
that.
just going to say through the chair, Martin, it is all public available, so we can also pop that on the website. So it's all public reporting as well. So
Rika?
So will we go over these sorts of things at the workshop session that we're going to have around that? So yeah.
yeah, through the chair, we'll be having a discussion with elected members about different operating models, different
Yes.
ways that information centres may be used, or and how we may be able to partner with different people to do that.
Absolutely,
Taking
yeah.
in mind the contracts for all of these information centres and the Thames one, they do expire 30th of June next year.
Next year. Yeah, because I think, and it's pretty obvious, but it seems fairly inconsistent across the board in terms of, investment, visitor numbers, things like that. So it'd be really good to be able to drill down into some of these and look at some of the different models.
Yeah, and through the chair, we've got to take into consideration we've had COVID and there were lockdowns, and also with the road closures, there are some areas in the district that were worse affected around numbers than others.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Just quickly before you go, when you mentioned that all of them have different KPIs and that some have many and some have few, is that something that would be looked at to sort of even out so that they're all reporting on the same thing?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. I'll just check. Deli, anything from you? Well, assume not. In that case, I'm very happy to move that we receive the District Information Centre year-end reporting. Do I have a seconder? John? All those in favour? Aye. Thank you.
Thanks.
Don't go anywhere because we've got you for the next item as well. Item 2.2, Destination Hauraki Coromandel Annual Report. Again, you can take it as read, but please fill us in on anything that might have changed or
I've actually got Hadley online.
welcome, Hadley. Oh, yep, there he is.
Are you there?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. And we've also got Mitch. Welcome.
So we have been asked.
Yeah.
We haven't asked Hadley to present the report. If we're taking it as read, I guess it's just an opportunity for any questions.
Yep, is it nothing else to update? Okay, any questions? Microphone.
Yeah, hi Hadley, John speaking. I had your presentation earlier this week up at the Coromandel Colville Community Board meeting, and much appreciated. I asked you some questions there because I did have some concerns, Hadley, about some of the items you raised that were on your website and what have you. And I don't know if this is the right forum, but I'll just signal it now. I actually do have some concerns about Destination Hauraki Coromandel not sticking to their knitting and actually the marketing, Hadley, is where I see you, where you should be focusing. And some of the stuff that was reported up at the Coromandel Colville Community Board meeting, and I believe at Thames and other community boards, it just looks to me like we're getting a little away from what I envisaged Destination Hauraki Coromandel should be doing. So I just signal that right now. No problems with the report, but I do have concerns, Hadley, that marketing is becoming secondary to you engaging with the communities regarding what they want, and you're going just off on a bit of a tangent, in my opinion. So I'll just signal that and I'll leave it at that.
I was going to say, John, I think we'll stick to our knitting because we've just been asked to receive the report. And no, and I do appreciate that the destination management plans will be presented to the community boards in due course. You say you've already had yours presented?
Yes, please.
My brain's gone blank. So we'll stick. Hadley, can I ask you a question about something that's actually in the report? Just because this is the sustainability and community resilience meeting, I'd noticed on page 11 of our agenda, under your heading performance targets, there's a listing for sustainability, which has a very pleasing upwards arrow. Ongoing, almost 70 businesses signed up and completed audits to date. I wondered if you could just elaborate on the kind of things that are included in that sustainability plan that businesses are signing up for.
Yeah, sure. So if I may, through the chair, and I appreciate that you have moved on, but just to respond to John's points, we're very well aware of your sentiment, and it's something that the governance and management team in partnership with the ED team are actually looking at in terms of our core business, what we're funded to do, and effectively staying in our lane. But yeah, a lot of those projects were central government funded that have kept us very busy, and then on top of these storms, and if anything, we're actually desperate to get back to core business because we are stretched. So I'll leave it at that, but happy to answer questions thereafter. And in terms of the sustainability program, so we've put 70 businesses through that program, and it's not dissimilar to what's happening throughout other regions throughout New Zealand. But our focus is more so on carbon-free, waste-free, and predator-free. And yeah, am I able to share my screen or not? No, I don't think I can. Essentially, that's the core component of what we're supporting businesses to develop, and a lot of procurement process in terms of how they can improve as well. And it's all on our website. In terms of
my governance superstar has suggested that you can share your screen. You should be able to share your screen through Teams.
Okay, I've got here only meeting organisers and presenters can share. So if someone can make me presenter.
Okay, we will share the link to the webpage. Thank you.
I've got a. Here we go.
Oh, yay.
It's almost a little bit because we're trying to keep this super simple in terms of what I've just referenced: predator-free, carbon-free, and waste-free. So there's a whole section on our website that helps the businesses enter into the sustainability place or grow what they're actually doing. We have vision, outcomes, and results. But what I might actually skip to is an example of one of the 70 businesses that have gone through this program. So here we have effectively a certificate for the Waiumu Cafe. And this is what they were assessed through from the professional, not here at DHC, we just promote it, their outcomes. But this was done some time ago, and Julie at Waiumu Cafe, as an example, has taken this and moved on forward to the point where she now has a milk on tap. So, she's not throwing out milk bottles as part of her procurement and so on. Another example is Donna at Sunlover and Tairua. Once she went through this program, she said, okay, so I now know how many trees I'd need to plant to offset our visitor impact. I actually want to go further and plant a tree for every visitor we do actually have. So when you open the door in terms of programs like this, it often builds momentum and takes off. Part of the inspiration for how this all came about was when we had a presenter come to one of our industry forums with over in Pukapark, and it was actually a guy from the founder of Canopy Tours in Rotorua, who's one of New Zealand's award-winning businesses. And after that, the industry was saying to us, we have to do something. We have to build momentum off the back of our natural assets that we do have. So there's definitely demand out of there, and 70 businesses signing up for this is pretty case in point. But going back to John's point, we're not resourced to deliver this ourselves, and simply not funded to either. So we're trying to build strong alignment with national agencies such as Tourism Industry Aotearoa, which are the equivalent of Federated Farmers for Tourism, basically. They've just released their latest report and have 3 key focuses. So reset system design and management, so that's all around tourism funding, which local government's struggling with countrywide. Action on carbon emissions and biodiversity, and then equip tourism businesses. So, this is not a thing that we're doing in isolation. And if anything, we're really trying to hold hands to get the best outcomes and leverage what's going on nationally. That's where we'll be heading on the other side of this sustainability program. So, yeah, I might leave it at that and enable you to answer questions if you want, ask questions, because otherwise it could go on a bit.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarity on that. And I also appreciate the tui that you have outside your window, which is making lovely noises for us. It's very, very appropriate to what we've just been talking about. So I'll open it up and see if anybody else has any questions for you. John Morrissey does. Go, John.
Hey, Hadley. Hey, listen, all your work's admirable, Hadley, and I feel I was being a little harsh. It's admirable stuff. It's just when I'm spending ratepayers' money, I want to know what bang we're getting for our bucks as far as getting tourists into the area going. I mean, Julie's doing a great job up there, and planting trees is fantastic. Hard to argue against it, but I'm really, it's just about that marketing. That's what I really want to hear about, and how we're getting out there and selling this place that we've got. So that's what I'm about. Thanks, Hadley.
Yeah, I appreciate that and agree. And again, we're working closely with the ED team in terms of sticking to our knitting, as you would say. Yeah.
Councillor Rodley.
Good morning, Hadley. So I know that recently there has been the desire by countries that are buying out some of our primary produce to know about the what's the word? The carbon footprint and the how it's produced and all the rest of it. And you seem to be saying that there's an increasing visitor desire to also want to be visiting attractions or businesses that are doing the same thing. Have you got any comment on that?
Yeah, I have got a comment on that in terms of we can source information that proves it through data, but more than that, just anecdotally and through the information that are coming through the national tourism agencies, it is the core focus. And just as I shared the screen with TIA, Tourism New Zealand are delivering a Tiaki program, which is all about care, and that will be adopted with key aspects of what we're going through right at this point in time in Cathedral Cove and what Department of Conservation are doing. And in terms of the product experience and what visitors are having when they come to New Zealand, they're seeking out these sustainable companies, but more so a connection with place and how they can make a positive impact. And that's why the likes of Zealandia, the predator-proof experience in Wellington, have just won the national award for the best tourism company in the country. And there's countless examples of these sort of initiatives, whether they're specific to business or regional experiences like the Able Tasman Track, where you donate to Project Janzoon when you do the walk, and it helps fund protection of biodiversity and so on. So just as you can hear the birds while I'm talking, you can see and contribute to the regeneration of the space that helps that local environment. So we could provide, there's countless amount of information that we could provide to substantiate the direction that we're heading, and we're well positioned to capitalise on this opportunity and make sure that Coromandel doesn't become a commodity, if you like, just another region. We're far better than that, and we've got these natural assets with the ranges and 400-kilometre coastline to really push above our weight.
Thank you.
Oh, I believe I have a question from my deputy chair.
Thank you. Hi, Hadley. Yes, we did have Hadley at our community board networking session yesterday and covered off lots of things. But I just wanted to ask in particular about this funding that you have received here from the what's it called?
Strategic Tourism Asset Protection Policy. They love acronyms in tourism.
Yeah, okay. I was like, I think I should write it down. Sorry, I've lost it on my screen. So you received some funding, of which then you do you just administer that and pass that on to the Kuatunu Dark Skies and the mountain biking folks? Because it's sort of some 540K, so it's a huge amount of funds, but do you act as a conduit to distribute that money to these regional projects? How does that work?
Yeah, so we went through a process in terms of meeting with both the ED teams and the respective councils, and obviously we had guidelines from MBIE in terms of how the money was spent in the selection of the projects. But for the majority, yes, we would facilitate the spend through different agencies or consultants who are looking at the particular work. But there's variations. So in terms of the Dark Sky, for instance, which we have a progress report on here, Cara Jordan, our company administrator, was a helping hand in that and remains is still working with the Dark Sky at the moment in terms of making sure that those deliverables are achieved while we transition out and back to our core business. So it's really dependent. Another example, the Pukoro Shorebird Centre over the coastline, we helped set up the terms of reference, but then it's working with Ngāti Pawa, iwi, Department of Conservation, and really managed by the Shorebird Centre staff and management themselves, along with the consultants being Tourism Research and Conservation, who were selected as part of that. And at times our board would get involved in terms of selection of, if there were consultants that had to be appointed, they would sit on the panel. So yeah, it depends on the project. With respect to the sustainability, we engaged Instep, who are Whangamata and Hamilton based. They work with the likes of the Field Days, Hamilton Airport, and around the world. But given that they were local, it's a pretty good opportunity to support local, but have these guys travel local as well. So it's not as if, we're doing all the work ourselves.
So of that 540 odd K, how much would have gone to the Dark Skies group to assist them with their they're doing a change in the district plan, is that right?
Yeah, so Cara Jordan, our company administrator, was supposed to be joining today. She'd have all that information at hand, but it's probably in the realm of more. And excuse me, I'm providing.
Certainly we can get a report that just has the breakdown of the stat funding.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
That'd be excellent. Thank you.
Probably 30K, 30, 40K for that, 50, 60K for the Pukoro shorebird strategy and so on. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I think a breakdown would be really useful. Thank you. I think that's the end of questions. So I'm going to ask for a mover to receive this report. Yep, Rob Martin, any seconder? I'm happy to second. That's to receive the report, and all those in favour? Aye. Okay, that is carried. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Hadley. Our next item, 3.1, review of the social wellbeing strategies. We have our District Manager, Dean Allen, with us. Thank you, Dean. Welcome. You can take the report as read and all the attachments. I very much appreciated having the report that was written for the previous council attached in there. I think it gave us a really good background. Anything to add, or are you happy to just take questions at this point?
I'll just give a really brief overview. So when we're talking about the social wellbeing strategies, we're talking about the three: the disability, the positive aging, and youth strategy. You can see that we haven't reviewed them for a while. There was a paper, which is attachment B, that basically did some targeted engagement around 3 or 4 years ago. And we haven't done work since then because the decision was to defer the work until the next LTP. It's really important that we brought this to you now because we do have a new committee. So we were looking for the direction of the new committee. We also have a new committee outcomes group, which would be the team that would be undertaking this targeted engagement and progressing that along. So you'll see the second resolution. We're basically just asking for your support to go ahead and do that targeted engagement. To some extent, it is repeating what happened in 2020, but because we've got that new team and we've got yourselves, we do believe that it's a good use of our time to do so. And we'll also review the action plans, which will give us a really good steer coming into the LTP as to how we will approach the review of those strategies moving forward. So at that point, yeah, happy to take any questions.
I'm going to kickstart the question with that. I'm quite aware that there are maybe groups operating now that potentially weren't operating at the time. And so what's the best way for us as elected members to feedback groups that maybe need to be included this time around to you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. What we could do is look at the groups that we spoke to last time. Staff, I would propose, would then add to that, and Helen's team have got a bunch of connections that probably weren't there a few years ago. We can circulate that to this group and just test with you whether we've got everyone we need to, and then we'll progress it in that way.
Perfect, thank you. I'm going to say.
Hi, Dean. Thanks for this. I had a really quick question around, we're talking about engagement sort of incurring between March and May, and then do you think that gives you enough time to be ready for the final adopting of the LTP in That's late June, isn't it?
Yeah, so
That's a really tight timeframe, or?
yeah, so through the chair, let me clarify a comment that I made earlier. So there is budget set aside in the LTP for the review. So it's in there as a placeholder. Really, what we would be looking at is how we review and how we implement those plans. So the engagement will just really tell us from 1st of July next year, what we need to do and how we need to move forward. Whether or not we were to review all 3 plans individually or review them in one, or decide to sort of just establish 3 plans. Budget wise, it's probably not that far apart.
Okay.
The most timely exercise will be the actual engagement around it.
Martin, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair. So recently Creative Coromandel have gone out and essentially done an arts strategy review, and I think that has gone back to council to look at. I think that's where that is currently at the moment. And I've been involved with some of the public engagement there, specifically with artists and people in the creative field. It would seem to me that it's really vital that, like for instance, for the youth strategy, that we can have engagement with schools, because most, even primary schools or secondary type schools, have got youth councils, and then when we're talking about the disability strategy, obviously we have within Thames here, we've got the Hauraki Lifestyle Supported Trust. Within Coromandel, we've got Kilt, and I think we really risk having strategies that, like these current ones, that basically, with respect, were just created, put on a shelf. So yeah, I really think that the engagement that we do is absolutely vital, and I have no idea, well, a little bit of an idea, but not much idea about what youth want and need, but the youth do, and we have this committee has a real opportunity to not just be seen to do, this is not a criticism, not just be seen to do token engagement, but actually do really quite deep engagement. It may take longer, but if we exclude the people that the policies are affecting, then I don't want to, what's the point?
Is there a question?
No.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Just sorry, it's not public forum. I thought I could make non-question
No.
statement. Can't you?
Yeah,
Would you care to comment on that, Mr. Allen?
Through the chair, what I took from that is that it's really important that when we do meet with those stakeholders, we ask them what is needed for their relationship, just as much as what do they want to see from the strategies. So there may actually be some cases where us getting an understanding of the relationship and the needs around the relationship and is actually more important than what the strategy says and that type of thing. So we'll focus our engagement in that way.
And a follow-up question: could elected members be involved in those? Whether it's a public meeting or whether it's at schools or with the various providers, is that an option?
Yep, certainly in a similar way to we've done the recent LTP engagement where we put an optional invite out to the councillors. We're happy to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. And I appreciate the opportunity for us to also feed into who we're going to be consulting on with this targeted engagement. If there are no further questions, I'll ask for a mover and a seconder for both of the resolutions. I've got Rika and John. All those in favour? Aye, thank you, carried. Thank you, Dean. All right, next up we have 4.1, Mayoral Task Force for Jobs Project Update with Helen Flynn. Thank you, Helen, and it was quite exciting to see the film crew down at Ngāti Maru on whatever day that was.
Yesterday.
Was it
Been a long
yesterday?
week,
I don't know.
Morena, so I'm Helen Flynn and I'm really lucky enough to be in this new role in community partnerships that was created June this year. And although a lot of the focus is on recovery, we do pick up this Mayor's Task Force for Jobs. So just a little bit of a history. The Mayor's Task Force for Jobs has been around since year 2000. It was 7 more regional provincial councils that acknowledged that unemployment was New Zealand's greatest challenge, and the mayors themselves got together to say, what can we do about that? And since then, this has grown to 31 councils, mostly the smaller rural regional councils like Thames Coromandel, but Thames Coromandel District Council only joined partway through last year. Just our model is also slightly different. So I don't know if you're aware of Hauraki District Council's Great Jobs Hauraki. They've got an office with 3 staff, and it's a direct work broker situation where they work with the youth, they find them jobs. The funding for that is supported by the council. It doesn't just come through from the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs funding. So the way we're running it is the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs funding comes from Local Government New Zealand through Ministry of Social Development. And the way we're running it is with contracts with our partners, Valley Education New Zealand and Ngāti Maru Runanga. And that's because they've got those connections existing into the rangatahi and youth that we really are at risk of, going on or being unemployed or out of education pathways unless they have some support. And that's been working incredibly well. Last year as a trial with Ngāti Maru, they were contracted to deliver on 12 outcomes and they gave us 16. So this year it's going well. I think in the report we reported 10 outcomes. We're looking at that today it's 11, and by the end of the year we'll have 17. So definitely on track to have the 40 that we projected by June next year. I just want to also update one other point about the cadets. It says in there we'll have, we were looking at 2 cadets. So that's where the where council will employ directly someone for 6 months, in the intention of giving them some sort of opportunity to get into the workforce, experience what it's like to have a career in council. So we're hoping to be recruiting for one to support the communications and community partnerships team in place by the end of this year, and the customer services one beginning of next year. On top of that, we've been looking at a recovery project on June Care over on the East Coast, and where there'll be a further 2 cadets funded mostly through Ministry of Social Development and recovery funding for 6 months to be working with June Care with the Parks and Open Spaces team. So that's an opportunity. Council's directly showing our support for this program by employing potentially 4 staff and putting 4 people into employment. Unless that was sort of the main points I wanted to add to the report, unless there's any other questions.
I just naturally, you're talking to Dean about potentially some of the people who've been involved with Mayoral Task Force for Jobs feeding into our youth strategy.
Yes, but that's slightly different. That's a slightly different project. So I'm involved with a group of people, which includes basically it's the youth workers. There's a group we've established recently that's going to meet for the 2nd time next week. That consists of like Caps Hauraki, Ngāti Maru, Te Korowai, Te Huarahi. So we're working to try to come up with a joint work plan across those youth. So it links directly into the work Dean's just talked about the youth strategy.
Lovely, thank you.
Same agencies, Voice of Youth.
Need to hear it. Martin.
Yeah, just through the chair. So
So the Mayoral Task Force for Jobs at the moment, I mean, is quite heavily Thames focused. And with some of the rangatahi heading up to Fletcher Bay to do planting. If it was thought that it could expand a little bit, does the funding for staff, council staff time, is that included in the funding that the Mayoral Task Force for Jobs funds? Does that even make sense?
I think I get you.
Could it be expanded without being a huge
Yeah.
burden on ratepayers?
So although it feels team-centric, the reach is across the whole of the Coromandel Peninsula.
Okay.
And one of the projects I'm currently working on, which is not signalled here, is potentially between 6 to 8 youth employed in a collaboration again with Department of Conservation and Ngāti Hei over at Whitianga.
Okay.
We've got links into the whangamata. There's a youth employment, there's a youth apprenticeship scheme running in whangamata out of the high school, supported by Ministry of Education, that we've got links into as well. And like Ngāti Maru's links are not just team centric. A lot of their youth are coming from right across the district. In terms of staff time, this year my time is funded by recovery. And next year it's already signalled, we already know our funding from MSD is going to be cut. And although they've signalled a 10-year project, every year that looks like they're reducing the funding for this. So although it's an incredibly successful scheme, our outcomes in terms of the investment they've got in MSD versus the council scheme through the Mayor's Task Force, our outcomes are amazing when you look across the country. They're still, the restrictions are there. So it's my role will be to try and make it filter a bit more into the other areas as well.
Good. Thank you.
No further questions. I do want to just check, because I know that this area of youth and future generations is of particular interest to Delhi. So just check in with you, Delhi, to see if there's anything that you want to add at this point or any questions you have. Sounds like not. Okay. In that case, can I get a mover and a seconder to receive this report? Oh, great. And Rebecca and John again. Thank you. All those in favour? Aye. Excellent. Thank you, Helen. Our next item, 4.2, recovery plan update, and we have our recovery lead, Stephen Town. It's actually very hot in here. Yeah. No,
Cool.
Slug.
I understand that Delhi's having trouble with her mic. Delhi, if you've got any questions, can you use the chat function? Because we'd really like to be able to hear things that you have to say, even if we have to hear them by text. Good. I think we've got the heating sorted. Thank you, Stephen. Lovely report. Gosh, a lot of things in here and a lot of very sobering reading. Take it away.
Thanks, Chair. And Helen is going to stay and make sure I keep to task. And yes, you're right. There is a lot going on. So there's recovery is happening in many parts of the council operation. The philosophy that we've applied to recovery is that we, as far as possible, try and build recovery activity into our business as usual. And in this particular committee's focus around the shift towards community outcomes and creating these partnerships with community, that's been a really interesting development, because we don't have a past set of activities just to carry on. So a lot of what we're doing is new. We're very focused on spending other people's money first, because the council and the committee were very clear about what your preference is in that space. So we've kind of adopted that mantra, and Helen and the team are having great success at drawing funding from MSD. We've got some real money from the Cyclone Recovery Unit that we're keeping for activities that we think are really essential to embark on, but we might not have any budget for them. So that's that little treasure chest of funding is really important to us. We have a little bit from the Department of Internal Affairs as well. And fortunately, the reporting obligations are not sinking us at this point in time. So I'm not going to assume that I know what, as a new committee, what you might want to be focused on. What we can say is we're really pleased with the contributions and the effort that our very many partners are making, and you'll get a little bit of insight into that at a workshop next week when Gary's going to just give you some insight into the planning effort that is being made, and you know, not to take a too gloomy approach. We have had some really important briefings this week on the weather and what might happen over the next 6 to 8 months. So it's very uncertain. That's the first point. It's uncertain. We think that it's going to be hot and dry and windy, interspersed by very wet experiences of 2 to 3 days. So how that pattern actually plays out, it is of concern when we think about the land instability and the repetitive anxiety that, you know, this up and down that the community experience. So I'll stop there, Madam Chair, and just take the conversation where you'd like to. We are in a little bit of a pause space right now with our big transport proposals around resilience, because we don't have a government or a minister, and like everybody, we're waiting patiently for that to change.
Okay, I'll start with, I've actually got two. I'm just thinking about the Careers Roadshow, and you know, part of that for me was also just thinking about the fact that we were traveling to 2 communities, and so there's you know, extra people who have come to those career roadshows that maybe wouldn't have travelled all the way to Thames for our large one. And from a resilience point of view, I think, you know, one small group of people traveling to is better than a whole lot of people traveling from other places, and so we probably reduced some carbon footprints there. Is that going to be, you know, have you had thoughts about the career roadshows going forward? Because I know that this was a recovery measure to take the roadshow out, but is that something that we could continue with in the future?
I've heard the chair, I'll speak to that one. So, but definitely we've got another Careers Roadshow booked for February 2024. And that is going to 5 communities, so including Manaia as part of that. It's working with it's a slightly different in that we've got a bit more time to plan with business associations and look at it more like a job fair. But in terms of how it looks going forward, that really is a matter of being inventive about how we can fund that, because the funding to run 5 careers phone shows versus 1, there's a bit of a difference between those 2.
It's a good point. Just add a couple of comments to that. So historically we have worked with the schools, and Thames has been the main centre. It's something that we, from an ED activity, always plan for. And as Helen said, it's working with other agencies about co-funding to make that happen. We think the model of actually going around the district has been a lot more valuable because we've been able to actually target you know, students who wouldn't normally come to Thames as well. So that's been of an advantage too.
And just through the chair, the other thing about the roadshow is it's not just for students, so we make sure we've got a public slot, and we're working closely with Ministry of Social Development and agencies that work with rangatahi that are unemployed to enable them to come along to look at other options for careers.
Fantastic.
And that's point of February. It's more like a job, hoping to make
Yeah.
it a little bit of a job fair as well.
Excellent.
Helen, could I just request that you use the microphone, please? Just move it when you're talking. So it's close.
We'll put the additional microphone on. Yeah. Work. Just while you're sorting that out, I'll do my follow-up question, which is also, I think, a question for you, Helen, about the community transport survey. Really strong mandate amongst the people who filled out that survey for the use of public transport. And what are the next steps for that program or for that initiative? You know, you've done a survey of the needs to travel between Coromandel Town and Thames. What can we expect now?
So we've now obtained we've got some funding to do, we've got funding to do a trial. So the trial will be, we're looking at a 3-month trial, hoping to have that in place before Christmas. We're looking at a couple of existing providers and doing the proposal, which is going to the recovery group next week, is 4 return trips a week. No, 4 days a week return trips for a 3-month trial. And part of that, although we will, there's a significant amount of funding going into that, you know, compared to how you would normally fund a community transport, it gives us the data to then take through to Waikato Regional Council and their deliberations next year about public transport.
The happiest thing I hear all day. Thank you. Martin has a question.
So is there an opportunity, and one wouldn't wish to be accused of skewing the trial, but like really making sure that we promote the living daylights out of it to say, hey, you've said you want a thing, use it.
Part of the funding we've got allocated some money for communications and marketing. So exactly that, to try and make it as widely spread as possible. And just a comment in terms of the responses to the survey, you know, I thought that was a reasonably high response, and part of that is the fact that the community groups up in Coromandel are well behind this. So I think, but it's making it, the focus has been on providing transport between community of Coromandel and Thames for the Coromandel residents. But in actual fact, there's another focus here as well, because if we put the trial on for the next 3 months, we also could tap into the ability for visitors to be travelling from Thames to Coromandel. And so we will, that's another market we'll try and target when we put the trial in place.
So just a follow-up question. So year or two ago, several of us councillors sat in a room in the other building with regional council, maybe Waka Kotahi. And yep, here's them different routes, here's some options. It was sort of quite detailed, and then I think Waka Kotahi pulled out, but presumably these routes and trials and things is building on that work that was already done.
That's correct. And the my understanding is, and the majority of options that Waikato Regional Council is considering for public transport in the long-term plan for Waikato Regional Council, the majority consist of some version of public transport around the Coromandel Peninsula.
And they were looking at more of a more of a one place to another rather than doing like a loop concept, weren't they?
That's correct, and I understand some of those options include that. The mayor and who else is one of the councillors? Oh, John. Yeah. So we probably more be able to speak to that more from that committee meetings that go on.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's far from forgotten, Martin. It's still going on. It's in the Waikato Regional Council's long-term plan, because the only way we're going to get any service like this is through rating, and they're the organisation to rate. So yeah, and you want to make any comment, Terry? Because you're Yeah. Well, it's still happening and it's, yeah, it's been worked on. We'll get there.
Through your chair, we're just very fortunate with this. This is a little funding pool. That means we can go ahead and do the trial, potentially extend it, and we're not relying on the regional council and or Waka Kotahi to do the trial. So we can actually prove that the demand is there and promote that strongly. Then we've got a much better case to take to the regional council and Waka Kotahi about a larger public transport offering, and that, you know, that might be sometime into 2024.
Yeah, all stepping in the right direction though, so that's good news. Thank you. Any last or further questions from the, no? Okay, in that case, thank you. We will just, we've received your report. Can I have a mover and a seconder to receive this report? Martin Ricker, all those in favour?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Ah. So we'll have a 10-minute break. It's a coffee, John. It was reconvene in 10 minutes time.